So I'm driving down the interstate in the middle lane, and all of a sudden I get sandwiched by two tractor trailers. Do I have a case?
Welcome back to the Williams Elleby Howard Easter YouTube channel. We're going to answer that question for you today.
All right, so the short answer to that question is yes. But to kind of dive into that a little bit further, who do you have a case or a claim against? My gut reaction, Joel, is both of them.
Yeah, for sure. And in most states, what you're going to have is if you have two different people who are negligent or violate the law that cause you an injury, then the law is going to give you a means of divvying up fault. Like they may say driver A that came in from the right is 50% at fault and driver B that came in from the left is 50% at fault. There are states that have what we call joint and several liability, meaning that if one party is 1% at fault, they can be liable for the entire amount of any recovery you get. But most states now will allow the jury to divvy up percentages, and those percentages add up to 100, and you figure out who's responsible for what. So that's how you figure out who's at fault and what percentage they're at fault. But before you get there, like your scenario didn't say that there was damage done. Now, if you're sandwiched, you're probably going to at least have property damage. So there may be two people responsible for your property damage. But if it's the same thing with bodily injuries. If you're hurt, then they are going to divvy up fault the same way. So there's different things that you look at to see what percentages should be assigned to each person and whether any percentage should be assigned to you. So what's the first thing you would look at, Chase?
Well, the first thing I'm going to look at, just as far as the wreck was concerned, if someone were to call me, I'm going to look at the police report. Obviously, see what the investigation said, or kind of determine when it comes to the wreck. I'm going to see if there's any witnesses listed. I'm going to see if there's any cameras or anything like that. I can, pull and find to see, did one car come in first, other car come in second? Like, how did it all, play out? So definitely look for those kind of initial evidentiary things to really get a good picture of what happened.
Yeah, and speaking of videos and cameras and witnesses, another thing that I'm going to be interested in seeing if I'm the attorney evaluating this case is, did the car in the middle, in this scenario did you stay entirely within your lane when those other vehicles merged? Right. And did they merge in front of you, or did they merge like in your blind spot where you couldn't see them? Did you have an opportunity to brake? Should any percentage of fault be assigned to you in this scenario or not?
Right.
Because if you're getting ready to bring a claim, you kind of have to put yourself in the other person's shoes and anticipate what defenses they're going to make. And in this scenario, they may say, well, we merged in the front. He was in our blind spot. We didn't see him. Chase could have braked and avoided the whole thing. I don't know if that'd be a great defense, but it would be a defense you probably face.
Right, yeah, it's something you would consider too. And, when I think of these types of scenarios where, you get two defendants or people you're making the claim against, most of the time what happens, especially if it's not, Joel made that point about you can make sort of an argument that maybe that person, myself in this scenario, should have slowed down or done, did something different to avoid it. But most of the time what's going to happen is they're going to be pointing the finger at each other. So practically speaking, if you're the claimant or the person making the claim or the plaintiff, you're sort of going to be sitting back and say, hey, all I know is that you both came in. However you guys want to divvy this up, that's up to you. But here are my damages, whether it's bodily injury damages, property damages. It can make a claim difficult because, as you would imagine, driver A is going to say it's driver B is going to say it's driver A. No one's going to feel compelled to do anything about it until you either make that formal claim, file that lawsuit, and really get their attention. So it could be difficult in that regard.
Yeah, and I want to circle back a little bit to where we're talking about percentages of fault. One of those two drivers may have a really good reason for having merged into your lane. Like if somebody was merging into their lane from the outside and they had no choice but to merge in order to avoid. So around here in North Atlanta, we've got, how many lanes are on 75 South?
Jeez, I think it goes from 2 to 20.
Yeah, there's a lot. But if you're in the middle lane and you've got two cars coming and then you've got an on-ramp and somebody's trying to merge onto the interstate and then they just shoot over and cause the car on your right to come into your lane, well, okay, that vehicle may have a reasonable excuse as to why they came into your lane,
sure,
but the vehicle on the left does not, right? So all of these different things play into it, because even though wrecks happen all the time, there's so many different variables and factors that play into it that you have to consider when you're trying to decide, if you have a case and who you have a case against.
Right, and in that kind of scenario you're talking about, like, okay, well then do we look to the next car because maybe that car swerved in? You could just sort of imagine the difficulty in trying to prove liability on a case where, say there's a 20-car pileup on the interstate, right? Who was the one car, multiple cars, or whatever, who started that chain reaction, and how do you divvy the fault and things like that. So it can definitely get confusing. We talked in our last week's video about sudden emergency. That could be a reason why maybe one of the cars had to swerve over to avoid maybe another catastrophic wreck or whatever it might be. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of factors to consider. So yes, you do have a case, but there's so many more questions you have to ask to determine, okay, well, who's the case against? What are the damages? What does my recovery look like? Where does that recovery come from? If I have to go against my own insurance company to say get my property damage covered, then my insurance company is going to have to go after the other insurance companies to try to get their money back, and it's going to be a whole mess with the percentages and who pays what. So
yeah. So I guess the short answer to this entire question is, if you have damages, in other words, your property is damaged or you have bodily injuries, then yes, you do have a case. The hard part's going to come when you're trying to determine what percentages of fault the other parties have, and what kind of defenses they may present, and how you're going to divvy up who's paying what.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right.
All right. Well, if this video has been helpful to you, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week.